Alrighty. So my name is James Rodgers. I am one of the owners and the creative director at Lunar Animation, which is an animation studio based in the UK. And we make really nice CGI animation for commercials, video game trailers, feature films. We worked on projects like Jumanji: The Next Level, many other cool projects which I'm excited to share, which I can't talk about right now.
Kreativität ohne Einschränkung und in jeder Hinsicht extrem. So preist Apple den leistungsfähigsten aller Macs an, den Mac Pro. Ende 2019 wurde die aktuelle Version mit ihrem markanten Design veröffentlicht und der Supercomputer unter den Macs wurde von professionellen Nutzern sehnsüchtig erwartet. Denn gerade im kreativen Bereich waren Apples Computer ja immer schon oft das Mittel der Wahl. Die Formel, die Pro-Nutzer, genauso wie private Nutzer wie ich, begeistert, ist ganz simpel. It just works. Es funktioniert einfach, wie der frühere Apple-Chef Steve Jobs einmal sagte. Doch das war nicht die ganze Zeit so. Das Vorgängermodell des Mac Pro, der Champagnerkübel, wie er spöttisch von einigen genannt wurde, der traf nicht den Geschmack aller Pro-Nutzer. Er wurde zu heiß, er war nur begrenzt erweiterbar und er war dadurch, dass er sehr lange nicht mehr aktualisiert wurde, grundlegend auch nicht mehr so ganz zeitgemäß. Aber das ist Schnee von gestern, denn es gibt einen neuen Mac Pro und der musste vielen Wünschen gerecht werden. Wurden dann die Wünsche nur mit dem neuen Mac Pro erfüllt? Das ist eine Frage, der ich in diesem Video gerne nachgehen möchte und die für einen Laien oder nur anhand von Benchmarks gar nicht vernünftig zu beantworten ist. Deshalb freue ich mich, dass ich Gelegenheit hatte, mal mit Pro-Nutzern darüber zu sprechen. Und in Sheffield, im Herzen Englands, dort gibt es die Firma Lunar Animation. Dort wird mit dem Mac Pro richtig gearbeitet. Denn das Studio, das für große Filmproduktionen bekannte Namen arbeitet, das setzte zuvor auch schon den mittlerweile eingestellten iMac Pro ein. Und ich habe mit Gründer und Kreativdirektor James Rodgers gesprochen und ihn gefragt, welche Verbesserungen sich denn im Vergleich zu dem iMac Pro zum Beispiel ergeben haben.
Obviously, like there was immediate speed benefits that we were seeing, but it's been really interesting to sort of see it evolve over the last year because it had all this hardware in it, but not necessarily all of the software support was there. And one of the things that we've seen is how third-party developers have been utilizing some of that hardware. An example being Redshift, which is a GPU rendering engine, and we've recently started to kind of implement that into our current pipeline. To give you an example, one of the things that's really complicated in computer animation is rendering smoke, effects, things like that. And using the 28-core processor that's in the Mac Pro, one of those frames can take 45 to 50 minutes to render, and using the GPUs that are in the Mac Pro, we can render it in 58 seconds. And it's incredible. So we've actually been able to, on a recent project, render all the effects on one Mac Pro, which has been pretty incredible.
Und es gab diesen Moment, erzählte mir James, als der iMac Pro tatsächlich mal nicht mehr ausreichte.
We had an instance actually when we were working on the Jumanji project. It was right at the time when we actually got hold of one of the Mac Pros, and what it was, the issue we were having is that there was this huge Jumanji map. It was a massive texture, something crazy. And in the 3D scenes, we had a camera that was really quite close in, so you needed to be able to get that texture detail. And we were, but on top of that, we had all these assets in the scene as well, and they all had high amounts of texture. These were like photorealistic objects. So when we were trying to preview this with a client, you're trying to move around and preview it, but you're kind of limited by the amount of graphics RAM of the iMac Pro, which I think we have, I think it's 16 gigabytes. So one of the great things, so what was happening is you try and playblast the video on an iMac Pro, and what was happening is it was running out of texture RAM, and you can do this thing where it would clip the textures, and when a program like Maya would clip the textures, what that means is it's kind of just reducing the texture resolution down, and that's not great when I mean, it's great to be able to see the textures, but they're actually all low resolution. So when you're trying to see these really nice high-res textures, it wasn't actually working. Load that up on a Mac Pro, for example, and what we were seeing is you could then just load all those textures onto the graphics card, perfect, and then you could actually just preview what you need to preview.
Gehen wir nochmal einen Schritt zurück. Nun ist ja erst einmal die Frage, was ist denn eigentlich für so ein Studio wie Lunar Animation wichtig? Der Computer, das sagt James Rodgers, ist in der Arbeit ja allgegenwärtig. Gut, das kennen wir aus vielen Branchen, aber hier wird er besonders beansprucht. Und zugleich, so sagt er, soll man ihn nicht bemerken. Worauf kommt es denn nun genau an?
The biggest thing really is just making sure that the computer is stable. Stability is definitely one of the most important features. And the reason is that obviously downtime, we want to avoid as much downtime as possible. One of the most expensive things at the studio, and I'm sure the team here is going to love this, but it's the team, it's the people working on the projects. So when we have downtime, you're just basically losing money. You know, you'll be working on a project. You need to be able to make progress on that project. Computer animation takes a long time to create. It's slow. It's not fast. And whenever you have downtime, whether that's a day, even a couple of hours, you're just losing money. Realistically, it's super important to have stable machines that don't crash. You also don't want the artist to have to worry about technical problems as well. So we don't want the artist to have to become the technician. If an artist is having to, you know, start messing around with drivers because they're having crashing issues with whatever reason, clashes in hardware and software, they're not working on the project they're supposed to be working on. They're not doing the job they're supposed to be doing. Suddenly, they're trying to fix these technical issues. So we want the artists, when they're here at the studio, creating the best work and not really having to think about those things. You know, you can focus on the thing you're supposed to be doing, basically. You know, aside from stability, which is a really important thing for us, RAM is always really important in terms of just making sure that we've got, you know, 3D scenes can always take up a lot of memory. So it's really good. You don't want to be limited by a scene that you can load up and you're having to find workarounds, shall we say, to be able to load a scene up. It's much better if you just load that scene up. Again, you just immediately save time. So that's really important.
Auf der einen Seite soll der Nutzer also den Computer gar nicht bemerken. Auf der anderen Seite ist es auch nicht jetzt ganz so simpel, dass einfach nur eine Software darauf läuft und wenn man die zum Laufen gebracht hat, vernünftig, dann war es das. James erklärt uns, warum das eigentlich so ist.
So in animation production, there are a number of different processes that you go through to, you know, we don't just use one application to get from an idea to a final rendered image. So we have lots of different pieces of software we use to get from that section to the final piece. And one of the reasons why we do that is because you want to use the best piece of software for the task at hand. So just to give you an idea on what this is like in terms of our pipeline, we have artists that would start doing the previs, which is laying out cameras in a 3D scene. We use Maya for that. Then whilst that's happening, we're creating assets and 3D models for the project, whether that's characters, whether that's a table, and then we're rigging those, so we're putting bones in them so that they're animatable, and that's also being done in Maya. We also use some other applications as well, like ZBrush, which is great for doing sort of organic meshes. And then once that's done, we render it and light the scenes. And while that's happening, and by the way, when we render and light the scenes, we're actually doing that in it's a plugin that connects into Maya called V-Ray. So it's the V-Ray rendering engine. So we would light the scenes in Maya. At the same time, we're doing effects and simulation. That's being done in a program called Houdini. So that's creating things like smoke, fire, water, things like that. And one of the things we're actually doing now is we're actually rendering those effects using Redshift, which is a thing that we've recently started to do because of the Mac Pro. And those renders are then getting compiled with the renders from V-Ray, and then we're compositing those in Nuke to make the final picture. So it creates a really complicated workflow of moving through these different applications to get to the end result. And one of the interesting things with the Mac Pro has been, even though each one of these applications is actually really complicated and heavy, utilizes a lot of memory, we're able to open pretty much all these applications at the same time and work on them. So you can be simulating something in Houdini whilst you're switching over and you're testing some lighting in Maya using V-Ray, or texturing and updating something in Substance Painter. And the interesting thing there is, often if you're lighting a scene, you might think that gold is just a bit too reflective. So you can just easily switch over, update that asset live, switch back, and it's there in your render, and you're just saving time whilst you're working. So it's been really great to kind of do that. That's really sort of an explanation of the complex workflows.
Zusammen mit dem Mac Pro setzt Lunar Animation auch das Pro-Display XDR ein. Wie beim Mac legt Apple dort die Messlatte hoch an, sowohl was die Leistung angeht, als auch bei der Frage, was dieser Bildschirm kostet. Was sind denn jetzt eigentlich die Vorteile durch diesen Bildschirm?
The Pro Display XDR has obviously enabled us to now be dealing with HDR content. And of course, it's worth noting the P3 DCI color space as well on the monitors was essential when we were working on the Jumanji feature film. And that's not something that's sort of standard that you get on a display. And being able to switch it into that just means that you can see exactly what that content's going to look like when you're sending it over for the final color grade. So aside from that, general speed advantages are obviously there. One of the things we did recently, we worked on a project that was a really heavy city scene, and just being able to have all of those assets, cities are a really complicated thing, with all of the textures, being able to load that up on that machine and move around and be able to light that without having to kind of make efficiencies. Because whenever you make an efficiency, you're having to think, right, I need to only set the textures to a certain level to be able to pull it all into one scene, and then at the last minute switch those textures out for a high resolution texture or whatever it is. And we're not having to do that process. So you can just basically take the final asset, work with it on the Mac Pro, and final it. Again, you're just saving artists time. These kind of they feel like small things, they all add together to create something that's actually a really great tool for computer animation.
Wir hatten eingangs darüber gesprochen, Apples Pro-Nutzer hatten in den vergangenen Jahren viele Wünsche an Apple. Und mich hat natürlich jetzt interessiert, nach dem, was James über den iMac Pro und den Mac Pro gesagt hat, wo steht denn jetzt der Mac eigentlich bei den Pro-Nutzern heute? Wie ist der Stand der Dinge? Und natürlich habe ich ihn auch gefragt, mit welchen Gefühlen ein Pro-Nutzer eigentlich aktuell auf Apples eigene Chips guckt, namentlich den Apple Silicon.
I think it's a much better place than it was a few years ago, should we say. We now have a machine which we can easily upgrade. If we need more RAM for a project, for example, we can stick more RAM in. The fact that we can, they take advantage of the graphics cards that are in there, it's certainly something for professional users. And for us, having this machine gives us the confidence in working in macOS moving forward. And in relation to the sort of M1 side of things, of course, it's the elephant in the room. We can see that Apple are obviously moving over to this, in the long term, moving over to Apple Silicon. And I think it's going to be interesting looking at what we've seen from the M1 Macs. Even though they're the entry level, the performance has been pretty impressive. And we're really excited to kind of see how that's going to evolve into the Pro products.
Soweit mein Gespräch mit James Rodgers von Lunar Animation. Ein, wie ich finde, sehr spannender Einblick, was der Mac Pro eigentlich professionellen Nutzern wirklich bedeutet. Und wer weiß, was uns mit Blick auf den Apple Silicon in naher Zukunft noch so Spannendes bevorsteht. Das war's für hier. Wenn euch das Video gefallen hat, dann schreibt es gerne drunter, gebt ein Like. Ich freue mich über Abos für diesen Kanal. Für heute sage ich Tschüss von der Nordsee.